I'm always interested in the way that the Spirit of God just mingles between me and the people that I communicate with and says, here's one. It's like, you know, what, this one's shaped a little bit like you. And so I feel like so blessed that God does that for us. I just feel like that. I know the first time that we spoke, it was like an instant sisterhood that happens, and I think the Spirit of God does that for us, so that we, number one, we're not alone, and we know that we're not alone, and number two, so that we can be authentic about what's going on with each other and with the other people that we talk to. So when you and I first spoke, it was with this idea, because I reach out to people all the time that I think have similar audiences, so that we can offer something of support and help to those audiences.
Sure.
But when you and I first spoke, of course, we do our little introductions. Here's what I do. Here's what my title is. I'm certified in that. And my introduction is much shorter. Here's what happened to me. It's like not much else. But as a counselor, I want to ask you this.
Yeah.
How much of what you offer as a counselor to people, how much of that can be predicated on what you've experienced yourself?
Oh, everything, all of it. It is, and that's a short answer. I love that in our pain, God gives us purpose. And in my own pain, my purpose and my calling in life has always been to be a counselor, even before I ever came to know him. And it wasn't until, and I was doing work along the way before I knew him, and then after I came to know the Lord, always wanting to find answers for the pain and how to get healing, and all of that. But it wasn't until I had gotten married and probably about a year into my marriage that I was introduced to a faith-based process called the Genesis Process. And a gal from work had asked me, did I want to go through it? And I said, well, tell me a little bit about it. And she did. And it's about getting to the root issues with regard to, why do I do the things that I don't want to do? The ways that we cope, right? So this is Genesis is based on Romans 7, where Paul asked that question, why am I doing the things that I don't want to do? If we don't know why we're doing it, we cannot change it. And I knew that I was coping a lot with anger, but under that anger was deep, deep pain that had not been healed. And in my journey, when I was working through the workbook, the Lord was whispering to me, I want you to take this to women. And that's what started the ball rolling. And my question
So that's
to
what
him was,
initiated the whole counseling idea, was that this
yes,
needs to be something people can get a hold of and process
absolutely.
and use themselves. Right.
Absolutely. Right. So my husband and I ended up taking this process to our church community, and he facilitated groups for men and I facilitated groups for women. That's how we started. And I was working in the secular arena, in human resources. I have a background in entertainment. I have a degree in theater, and I worked in the entertainment industry for 14 years. And the Lord called me out of there. And then I said, okay, where do you want me to go? And I ended up at the international headquarters for the Foursquare Church in human resources. And it was there that I met the woman who introduced me to the Genesis process. It wasn't until 2020 where I was terminated from my job, and it was the last job I held in the secular arena, where I said, all right, Lord, you and me, let's go. And I started focusing on having him grow my practice. And in my practice, I use the Genesis process as the foundational work for every single client, because unless they know why they're coping in unhealthy ways, we can't work on anything else. We have to have healing around those hurt, wounded, trauma places first, in order to then walk in that healing and that health and that restoration that he has for us.
So where do you think this, I guess, how do you think that this Genesis process differs from a typical addressing of, counseling addressing the things that behaviors that we could do.
Right, right. So I can only speak from my own experience when I was in secular therapy. And that was we sat around and we talked. And there were no tools that were
Mhm,
provided. There was no deep rooted work. With Genesis, there is a workbook. So, yes, homework is assigned. And
mhm,
we start off first understanding that God is a God of change and he does not want us remaining stagnant.
mhm.
That's the first, aha moment for people. Because we can become comfortable even in the negative behaviors because it's familiar to us and we know how to
Oh,
navigate,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it's equipping. It's first what I love about it is that Jesus Christ is at the center of the healing, which is
Mhm,
missing in secular therapy
mhm,
because Jesus is the healer.
mhm. I think
If
you're
we
right. I think
if
that
we don't
well,
yeah,
go ahead, hon. Go ahead.
no, if we don't have that component, which
Mhm,
is a very, very important component and integral to our healing, we will not experience that true healing that the Lord has for us.
right. Do you and of course, I'm gonna work this into what my audience tends to reach out to me for.
Yeah.
How do we, how do we help people make the connection between their behaviors and their trauma,
Mhm.
um, and and then connect the ability to forgive those who've injured us to their healing?
Right. That's a great question. All of the work that I do with Genesis Process addresses all of that. There's an entire lesson on forgiveness, but it doesn't come until later on in the book because a lot of clients need to work up to that. So within
Mhm.
the Christian arena, there is a lot of confusion with regard to forgiveness and reconciliation. We are
Right.
called to forgive, period. That's a commit. We're called to do that. Reconciliation is a different story. So forgiveness is between us and the Lord.
Right.
Reconciliation has to do with the other person. And I always tell people, so I'm starting with that first. I always tell people, look, if that other person, number one, hasn't repented, we're not seeing consistency in a change of behavior, they continue to be abusive, it's unsafe for you, which means
Exactly.
which means reconciliation is not possible at that time.
And it doesn't
However,
mean it will never come. It doesn't mean
correct,
it can, and it
correct,
also does not mean that you can't forgive
right,
and get to a place where you're feeling healing and breaking
yeah,
that bondage of bitterness. You
right,
can do that
right,
without placing yourself in pain and
right,
suffering. I will tell you, one
exactly.
of the things that frustrates me to no end is, and I think you and I maybe even talked about this, is this idea that women who have been beaten and abused in the church by their spouses,
Yeah,
or women who have suffered through an adulterous relationship, their husbands had an adulterous affair,
yeah.
they go to pastoral counseling and they sit
Oh,
with their preacher, and he
yeah.
says these
Mhm.
words: "You
Yeah.
need to forgive him."
Oof.
And
I know.
that seems to be, like you said, associated with the idea of being reconciled to
Right,
him.
right. Yeah,
Well, when do we find reconciliation with God? It's not
right,
before we come to him with brokenness and repent and turn away from our sin. We cannot continue to live in that adulterous affair and
correct.
expect our spouse to forgive us and reconcile with us while we're still in it. And so
Oh,
what we hear from pastoral, counselors tends to be, you need to forgive,
mhm,
but don't show me how to do that and
right,
force me into a reconciliation
right,
that neither of us is ready for, either as a broken hurt person or as the
right,
perpetrator. We're not
right.
ready for that reconciliation. And I think that
Absolutely. Yeah,
I agree with you. I created
yeah,
a lot more pain and struggle
yeah,
when I tried to reconcile with my father, who in
yeah,
no way, shape, or form had any c he I thought I had forgiven him, so I was supposed to
right,
reconcile. He was
right.
in no place to do that,
Oh,
and it
no,
never
no.
happened. It just
Yeah.
created more hurt.
Absolutely. And what also creates more hurt is when the pastors tell the spouse
Mhm.
who's been betrayed, whatever that betrayal happens to be, you need to forgive. That's abusive. I'm calling that out as
Mm,
abuse because it is. Premature forgiveness is so much more painful and hurtful, and it tends to set back the individual in their healing process. It sets them back, and it creates an obstacle, because what you're doing by saying you need to forgive him when they're not ready, what you're doing is you are now putting guilt and shame on her.
Right. So now she's got
And
one more thing to experience
one
as a victim.
one more thing.
Right.
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 And
So,
and and the issue with that is, why aren't you caring for her?
mm-hmm.
She's been hurt. She's been so hurt, and yet you're leaving it up to her to bring healing into that relationship through forgiveness? I'm sorry, that's just the wrong order of things.
I think that I want to be careful here because I know that, and you already said it, the Bible tells us we need to forgive. We need to forgive a lot.
Absolutely.
70 times 7, that's
Absolutely.
an eternal number. That's a
All
lot,
the
right?
time. All the
So
time.
it is not, so what you're not saying is that he's wrong in telling her to forgive. It's that
No.
he has stepped in too soon with that command
Yep.
before addressing the pain and the hurt
Yes.
and dealing
Yes.
with that. And you're
Yes.
right, because I know in my own Bible study, I start with all of the things that came before I
Yeah.
got to the place I could forgive. It was that
Yep.
those feelings of
Yep.
being unloved and
Mhm.
unwanted and uncherished
Mhm.
and all of that.
Mhm.
That had to be dealt
Mhm.
with first before I could
Absolutely.
get to, because you're not ready. Your heart's not ready for that. Just to just
No,
say,
and
you know what? I'm going to let you go. It just doesn't work
right,
that way.
right, right, and so when I have a betrayed spouse sitting in front of me and she's like, "I know I'm supposed to forgive, but I can't right now," and I said, "That's
That's
okay.
okay. Yeah.
That is really okay.
Yeah.
Let's care for your heart because
Right.
it's broken, it's wounded, it's bleeding, and look, you will get there when you get there, and I will take it at whatever pace you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to determine that. But
Mm-hmm.
eventually, yes, forgiveness needs to happen. Why? Because when we hold on to forgiveness, we're giving that other person, the perpetrator, the power to
Right.
make us feel in a way that we're not wanting to feel.
Mm-mm.
So let's take the power back. Let's begin one step at a time every single day. Be intentional about forgiving. Don't give the enemy any foothold into
Mm-hmm.
that. So there's spiritual warfare that goes on with that too.
Oh,
We
sure.
we so I deal, a lot with that. But that comes further down the road because I need to meet them where they are at. It isn't about where I want them to be in their journey. It's where the Lord's going to take them in their
Mhm.
journey. He's
It is a
guiding them.
And it is a nurturing process. It is
It is.
really, you know what, we're going to start from the place of,
Yeah.
you knowing who God really is. And we're going to
Correct.
get to the place where we're talking about who you really are before
Right.
him, who your
Yeah.
perpetrator really is before
Yep.
him, and how
Yeah.
God intends to use this
Yeah.
once you get to the place where you can
Yeah.
let them go.
Yeah.
I love this conversation, but I'm going to
Yeah.
switch gears on you.
Yeah. 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 I want to go back to your question with regard to the trauma and the healing and
Mhm.
that process and introducing all of that. So it starts slowly, right? It's getting their toes into the water, if you will,
Mhm.
dipping the toe, because I have to read and be very aware of, is my client ready? And I'll know if they are.
Mhm.
Is my client resisting? And I'll
Mhm.
know if they are. Or do they need to build capacity to
Mm.
do this very hard work of healing?
Mm.
So, depending on what I am seeing, I have to be really sensitive as to, all right, how will they be guided in this? A lot of the times, and this was such a wonderful thing that I learned from another counselor through some training that I took. And he said, not every client who seems to be, ugh, they seem like they're resisting it, or they're being difficult, or, they're not ready for it. He was the one that said, maybe they don't have the capacity. And that was mind blowing for
It
me. So
really is a little bit like eating meat when you can only tolerate milk. right?
Exactly,
Very
exactly.
similar.
So it's all right. So, and I tell my clients, I'll go at the pace that is comfortable for you. I'm not going to move you faster than you're ready to go or slower than you're ready to go.
Mm,
I always want their input. How's this going for you? Give me some feedback so I know how to pivot with them.
mhm.
But we need to start with number one, recognizing and acknowledging that there is trauma.
Right.
Number one. Also, with them, because they don't think about this, in your trauma, and all trauma has grief, which means there's been some losses. Have you grieved those losses?
Mhm.
Right? The loss of relationships, maybe not through death, but maybe it's estrangement. And I've
Mhm.
had that and continue to have that.
Yeah.
Um,
And for me, it was loss of what I thought life was gonna be, you
that's
know?
it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that. So have you grieved any of that? They don't even think about that.
Mm-mm.
So it is layered. Trauma is very layered. So I guide them with the Holy Spirit as best as I can. I always rely and depend on the Holy Spirit
Mm,
in every single session. So they go through each of the lessons that are in the workbook, and I go a lot deeper than the questions that are there because the Holy Spirit is guiding. And so I'll ask
right.
deeper questions to get to those root issues. They also get equipped with really great tools. But I also, in this workbook, we start identifying false beliefs because when we talk about why do I do the things that I don't want to do, I never address the behavior. And behavior modification doesn't work
Mhm.
because what's driving the behavior is a belief system.
Agreed.
And
And
if
that's
we
exactly where I
right?
start too in my studies
Yeah,
is we have to start with all the lies that we have accumulated and they
exactly,
have formed our
exactly.
personality or our dependence upon whatever it is that we're
Right.
self-medicating with or whatever. So
Correct.
I
Correct.
would we're first of all, you and I are going to have to do more than one podcast. There's no doubt in my
Sounds
mind.
good to me.
But but I want to talk
Yeah,
about you specifically
yeah,
because the title of my podcast is Diary of a Discarded Daughter.
yeah,
And I want what I like to do is make sure that my audience understands that they are not alone in their experiences
correct.
as a victim or as someone who has suffered trauma at the
Yeah,
hands of anybody, whether it's
right,
their
yeah,
parents or a stranger or a teacher or
yeah,
whatever, it doesn't matter.
right.
So you got into this, you started this process in your own life
Yeah,
because of your own discarded daughter
yeah,
experience. Tell me a
absolutely.
little bit about that, so that our listeners can
Yeah,
relate to where
yeah,
you were when you started and now
correct.
realize that you're at a place where you're
Yeah,
experiencing freedom.
yeah. So where I started in my healing process was I wanted to change a behavior, and that was the rage that I would feel all the time.
Yeah, I just talked about that 2 weeks ago. I mean, I just published that episode. You're right. That it's a
And
big one. It's a big
it
one.
it is a big one. Now, my family, my parents, that's how they coped. So it's learned behavior. And all anger does is anesthetize. So you cannot feel anything else
Mm,
other than the anger that you're feeling. And that rage came from a very deeply wounded place. A lot of hurt. So I'm the firstborn and I have a younger brother, and my mother favored my brother over me. I never felt wanted. I never felt loved by her. Now, it was really interesting last night, Lisa, when I was in bed trying to go to sleep. The Lord reminded me, I want you to consider your own parents' stories.
mm.
Ooh. Oh,
Victims raising victims.
yes.
Yeah.
Just discarded sons and daughters.
Mhm.
A
Mhm.
discarded, my dad was discarded, my mother was. Now, I don't know all this. They're both deceased. So I don't know the nitty gritty of things, but I know that my mother was orphaned at 9 and she was placed in an orphanage. She had older siblings that did not take her in. She was discarded.
Mhm.
And my dad was the youngest of 4, and he was not the favored son but the older daughter and the older son were favored children of
Now,
4.
is that a cultural thing anyway? Like the olders tend to be favored? No.
It culturally, well, no, actually, in the Armenian culture, because I'm Armenian on my mother's side, the sons are favored. On the Jewish side, I think the sons are favored more, but yet it was the older son and the older daughter that were. Now, I don't know
Mhm.
why. And it was interesting because my grandparents always remembered my brother's birthday, but not mine. So,
Mhm.
so there you have it. But it was, I could never be enough. I could never do enough to be accepted by my mom and have her approval. And, it was interesting. I looked up the word, the definition of discarded, and it is to get rid of, especially as useless or
Mhm.
unwanted.
Right.
And my mother would say some horrible, horrible things to me, like, you will always live in the gutter because that's where you're from. And,
Mm.
I honestly, Lisa, I firmly believe she had undiagnosed mental illness, because I
Mhm.
can't imagine a parent in their right mind ever saying that.
Saying that to a
You
child. I
you
agree.
you know?
Yeah.
And I was when
I'll just tell you, I can relate to that
yeah.
a little bit. My dad actually told me on his deathbed, after years of abandonment and deception, he created, last I heard, there were 9 of us with 9 different women,
Oh my.
and he didn't father any of them. I mean, parent any of them. He fathered, but he didn't parent any of them.
It was a
And he
sperm donor for
actually,
all of them.
he was a sperm donor for all of them. But he did say one time, right in
Mm,
front of my mother
mm,
and I, when we were seeing him really close to his passing,
yeah.
he said, "But I wouldn't change a thing."
Oh, wow.
And I thought my head was going to pop.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had
Yeah.
very few opportunities to talk to me. He had very
Yeah.
few opportunities to talk to me.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
that to be one, for him to say that during one of those very few opportunities to talk to me, um,
Oh,
it was
wow.
crushing, because
Yeah.
what he was saying to me is, not only did I hurt you, but I'm good with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. And not to minimize that, because that is so painful and that is so hurtful. It also makes me wonder, who in the world hurt him?
Right.
Because that is coming from a very deep place of pain as
And I
well.
think you're
I
right.
mean,
I think when you
you
say
know,
something about mental illness maybe being,
yeah,
because the only thing, when I
yeah,
look back at the levels of deception in his life and the things that he
yeah,
did in his life, I have to wonder,
yeah,
you were just not maybe well. I mean, yes, you were
right,
probably victimized too, but I'm wondering about,
yeah, yeah.
traumatic head traumas and things like, who knows? Yeah.
All
Agree.
sorts of things, right? And yet, while we can have an understanding of that to try to make sense of why a parent would be that way, I'm always of the mindset, get some help. But
Mhm.
if they're not wanting the help, there isn't anything that you can do to change any of
You
that,
cannot
right?
fix that, and you still
No,
have that mandate from the Lord that says, "But I still need you to forgive." So
exactly,
so
exactly.
tell me,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna ask about reconciliation first, I'm gonna
yeah,
ask
right.
about forgiveness first.
Yeah, yeah.
So what brought you to the place where you were able to forgive
Mhm.
being discarded that way?
Um, the truth. The truth about my mom. Uh, Part of the exercise in the forgiveness chapter of the work that I have my clients do and what I did myself, and this was, I think, the most healing part of the process of forgiveness, was asking the Lord, Lord, what do you want me to see
Mm,
about this person, and what is true?
mhm. It's really
Ah,
difficult to see those, and, I this is
yeah.
one of the things, this is what I'm saying, you and I are like peas in a pod. Uh, it was difficult. The hardest part for me was realizing that God does not see my abuser the way
Right.
that I do.
So,
And what I have to do is find a way to see them the way that he does.
Exactly.
And it changes your perspective of
It
them,
really
because you know
does.
what, like you had said, I think my parents were victimized as well. They were
Mhm.
had discarded issues as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
If we can see them as victims
Mhm.
themselves,
Mhm.
it changes the way it's almost
Yeah.
like a meat tenderizer for the heart.
It really is. I have found that in my own journey, the Lord allows me to see others the way that He does. So I
Mm.
put on His eyes, right? And it allows me to have that compassion where I'm able to see, oh my, this is the little girl that got wounded, or this is the
Mhm.
little boy that got wounded. Because sometimes those little girls and little boys do come out to play. And I see them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And in counseling, I address them. You
Yeah.
know, it's that little boy that's doing this. It's that little girl, because they don't have a secure attachment. And that
They're looking
happens
for a
when
lap.
they
Right?
are.
You feel like I feel
They are.
like one of the things that's really missing in the church is that we have a tendency to play God as
Yeah.
the punisher, the
Mm,
justice maker,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
exacting judgment
Yeah.
God of the universe,
Right.
which is all
Right.
true stuff.
Absolutely.
But in order for you to have a relationship with a father, there
Mhm.
has to be some
Yeah.
connection. There has to be a
Right.
way to connect with
Mhm.
a dad. For me, I never had an earthly father, so all of the things I experienced or thought of regarding my heavenly father were tainted.
Mm.
It was like
Yeah.
God can't possibly, I mean, if God's like the
Yeah.
earthly father, I want nothing to
Oh,
do with it, right?
I hear you. I hear
And
you.
so developing the ability to get on his lap and find comfort,
Yeah.
I think is critical for those who are hurting.
Yeah.
So I would talk to you all day about this, and now we're gonna have to come up with another time so we can get things together. But I want to, because we're coming up on half an hour, and I know
Yeah.
I know my audience. They're like, just between home and work. I want to be able to listen
Yeah.
between home and work. So
Right.
tell me how
Yeah.
people can find you, and I'll put all this information in the podcast information. But tell me
Mhm.
how people can find you and find some resources and be a part of the audience that you're reaching out to.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to find me is on my website, trueyouministries.com. On there, I have a link to my podcast. I've got the social icons on there. I'm on the different platforms for my podcast as well: YouTube, Rumble, Apple, those places. And I do offer free 20-minute consultations. So I always tell people, look, whatever it is that you're wanting counseling around, schedule that consultation. It's free. I may be the right person for you based on what I offer. And if you are looking for what I offer, great. But if not, I have a network of counselors that I have vetted that I refer people to. And they're
Right.
all Christian counselors, right? Whether they're licensed therapists or they're, or if you're needing coaching, whatever. I want you to get into really, really good hands where, if you're wanting that faith-based aspect, right? You'll get that. So I tell people, hey, you may think what I offer isn't exactly what you're looking for, but reach out anyway, because
Mhm.
you never know who I'm going to know that I may refer you to. And a lot of the time, for some people with regard to trauma, they may respond better first doing some of the somatic work, which
Mm.
is releasing the trauma from the body.
Stacy
Yeah.
Echeverria. Is
Yes.
that right? Close.
Yes.
Close. Thank
Mm.
you
Oh, it's
so
beautiful.
much for
Thank you.
being here. And you know
Appreciate it.
what? Lives are going to change
Yeah.
because we're sharing our stories and we're
Yeah.
sharing that discarded recovery
Yeah.
for daughters like us. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you. Appreciate it.